Hello, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen. This is Nishant Garg, and welcome to another episode of the Nishant Garg Show. The show is about extracting information on mindfulness and personal development. Thank you for listening to this podcast today. My today's guest is Diane. She spent 11 years as an entrepreneur, voluntary, business mentoring for a high-profile charity, balanced with being a mom and organizing busy family life. Now, she is following her passion and purpose, which is to combine all the best bits and skills she has learned into helping others to better manage thoughts, emotions, and behavior in order to consciously create the life we want. Her passion is understanding the correlation between emotional regulation and success in life. After practicing mindfulness for 20 years, she qualified as a mindfulness coach and believed that mindfulness is a key tool for building emotional intelligence. Now, let the episode begin. Diane, welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me on.
Yeah, I really appreciate you for being on the show. And I have gone through your profile and I have so many things that I really want to ask you in mindfulness, compassion, empathy, and in this whole mindfulness world, how we can cultivate mindfulness in our day-to-day life to really deal with the stress and to have a better work-life balance.
Yeah, and I think just to deal with life in general, I think it can really help us in everyday life and can make such a huge difference to how we live our lives, the decisions we make, even just the small decisions on a day-to-day basis and how we experience every day.
Yes. I would like to start off with your experience. You have more than 20 years of experience in mindfulness world. I would like to ask you, how did you get started into mindfulness?
Well, I first started practicing when I was pregnant with my first child. And I went along to, it was an antenatal yoga class that I'd gone along to. And I'd never really heard of the word mindfulness. And actually the word mindfulness was never really mentioned. But we did at the end of each class do quite a bit of mindfulness. And it was all about gearing up for the birth, to have a mindful birth, to be able to take control of the mind and to use that and to use our thinking and to use a positivity to envision how we wanted the birth to be, with the aim being to try and have as natural a childbirth as we could. And I found it was really useful while I was pregnant as well, just to manage the sort of the tiredness, not sleeping, and the changes in my own body, and to juggle at that stage working as well when I was tired. So I felt it just helped me take control back of my mind. And then just before my daughter was born, there was the attacks, the 9/11 attacks, and that was quite an unsettling time. It was an unsettling time to be thinking about bringing a child into the world. And I think having the mindfulness really helped me with that, because I think otherwise I could have gone down into quite a negative spiral of the stress and anxiety of what was happening out in the world. But I was able to really just focus back on what was happening, on the things I could control, and managing my own thoughts.
Yeah. So at the time, what practices did you have, or what mindful practices did you have at that time when you were giving birth to your child?
So a lot of it was more the sort of the relaxation ends of meditation. Because I remember I didn't sleep well, so I spent every lunchtime I would do a meditation, and I found that was the equivalent of getting a good night's sleep. There was a lot of visualization and a lot about sort of positively rewiring your mind in terms of visualizing how you wanted the birth to go, how you were going to manage the pain and the self-talk that came along with the pain. And I remember during the labour, there was various times where I was thinking, I can't cope with this, it's too difficult. And I managed to sort of divorce that mind chatter. And we always had the saying at that point, wait half an hour and then see how you go. And it was the self-talk, I guess, and sort of battling the mind and always being stronger than the mind, which is something I still take from mindfulness to this day.
Yeah, I wanna connect to meditation and self-talk. What kind of meditation were you doing at the time?
At the time, it was a lot of yoga nidra and a lot of breathing exercises. So it was about different breathing exercises to get into your body, connect with your body, and again, to help with pain management.
And can you give us a small demo about breathing meditation?
Well, one of the ones that we were actually taught for while we were in labour was quite a high up humming breath. It's a hummingbee breath, which is a really relaxing breath, but it keeps your focus quite high up in your chest. So what you do is you take a deep breath in, and then in the out breath, you just very gently hum. It's like a bee would be. And you can place your thumbs over your ears to sort of enhance the feeling of the sound. And you also feel the vibration of it as well in your throat. And that's said to stimulate your vagus nerve, which helps stimulate your parasympathetic nervous system, which instantly makes you feel more relaxed.
Yeah. And coming back to the concept of self-talk.
Yeah.
So what do you think about self-talk and how it can change somebody's lives?
I think it's the difference between recognising that voice as being separate to you, and that the voice and the words the voice is talking aren't necessarily true. And certainly with pain as well, at the time when I was using it, it was understanding the difference between discomfort and the sort of niggles and the actual pain, and whether or not you stop. And I still use that. I still practice yoga now. And very often when you get into position in yoga, that same voice starts saying, you can't do this. You're not good enough to do this. You're going to fall. You're not flexible enough. And it's actually switching that off, not listening to it, and just focusing on the I that's underneath that and keeping going. Now, obviously, if it's real pain, you want to listen to the messages of real pain from your body. But that voice is very often, it's different. It's the doubting voice. It's almost the voice of the ego that doesn't want you to fail. It's coming from a good intention, from a good place. But actually, you don't want to listen to it, and you always want to be stronger than it.
Yeah, and self-talk plays a very important role in our life, so that we can change the negative script that is constantly going on in our mind.
I think especially when we're out of our comfort zone. So if we're feeling discomfort and when we're in areas of growth as well and change, and that's when that voice gets louder and louder again, because it's trying to protect us. It doesn't want us to fail. And that's when it gets difficult, because we start then doubting ourselves, and it's uncomfortable. We're stretching. And in some ways it would be easier in the short term if we did listen to it, took a step back and didn't do it. I think that's then what leads a lot of people not to be taking the risks, not to be doing the things that they could be doing. And it's when you do have that growth and that stretch, I think that's where you get real enjoyment and personal satisfaction. Your self-confidence soars because you're actually achieving things and you're living the life that you want to be living. And I think as children, we're probably pushed more out of our comfort zone. So I was looking at my daughter turned 17 last week and has just started learning to drive. And she came back from her first driving lesson and she was saying about how scary it was out in the roads. But she went out there and she did it, and she went back out and did it again. And I thought, that is age and stage. I think children, they're used to being out of the comfort zone. They're used to being tested, to be going in exams, to be trying new things, learning new skills, that they become a bit of a sponge to it, and they accept that they've just got to do it. Whereas adults, we can avoid these situations very often. And it takes quite a lot of guts, a lot of courage to actually go for these things as we get older, and to go over the fear. And especially because we get more and more used to being in our comfort zone as we get older. We get more used to being good at everything we do. So then to come across something that we're not good at, something that stretches us, it can be even harder to accept that and to grow from it.
Yeah. And so it's we human beings get really comfortable in the comfort zone.
Yeah.
How do you recognize that you are getting into comfort zone and now this is the time to be that comfort zone and do something?
I think that's the real big difficult question, and that's the thing I find most frustrating with people, is that there's so many things that we can just distract ourselves with, and we can go through our whole life not actually answering that question or even thinking that it is a question that needs to be answered. And I was very much inspired by a book that I heard about. It was called The 5 Biggest Regrets of the Dying, I think it's called. It's by a lady called Bonnie Ware, and she lived in New Zealand, and she was an end of care nurse, and then she wrote a book all about the top 5 regrets of the dying. And one of the top ones where I went along the lines of, I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life that others expected of me. And I thought that was so sad that so many people were feeling that at that stage. And I think that is probably significantly because people don't ask questions as they're going along. They go along a path very often that they think they should be doing, that other people, maybe not overtly, are forcing them to do. But I think that voice in our head, we get a lot from our parents, from our culture, about how we should be progressing and going forward. And it does take courage to actually stand up to that and to get out of our comfort zone and to go and live the life we really want to live.
Courage is very, very important. And sometimes whenever we are starting anything new, or when we are learning any new skill in life, we do not have confidence at that point.
No.
We need a lot of courage. But with time, we can get better at their skill and we can learn a lot of confidence with time. But initially, it needs a lot of courage.
Yeah.
And and the self-talk and the doubt, fear that, that we are not good enough, we are not worthy of this, that constant noise is always there in our head. What advice would you recommend to somebody who is having all these thoughts, how they can shift life from negative script to positive script?
Well, there's a sort of a process I go through, which I can chat through, but I was just going to mention about the word courage. I think it's really interesting that the cur within the word courage comes from the Latin meaning the heart. And I think one of the first things we need to do is get in touch with our heart. And that helps give us courage. If we can get out of that thinking mind, get away from the self-talk and really understand what we want to do, how we want to live our life, what we want to achieve, then that helps give us the courage, because it's coming very much from a place of love and from our heart, which is a place of strength and authenticity. So the first thing I say to people when I'm working with them is, what is it you want? What's your passion? What's your purpose? But the really disturbing thing, which has actually driven me very much in the work I'm doing, is so many people, their answers to that question is, I don't know. And they don't know. They don't think about it. They distract themselves all the time with all these other things. They numb all these thoughts. They just keep very, very busy doing the sort of the things they feel they should be doing. And I think the first stage is to have an awareness of what your thoughts are, to become an observer of the thoughts so that you can witness them and you can start to get to know them, and you can disable some of that, the sort of the autopilot, so you're not constantly living in autopilot. And apparently we spend about 50% of our waking time on autopilot. So you think, well, no wonder people don't know what they want, because they're not conscious. They're not living their life through their senses. They're living it through the fog of the thinking mind. So I think the first stage is very much get out of autopilot. And the way you do that is by having an awareness when you're in it and constantly pulling it back into the here and now. And I think the sort of formal meditation and mindfulness techniques, such as breathing techniques where you pull it back every time your mind wanders, those kind of techniques can just start to actually enable you to take a step back and witness those thoughts and understand that there is a voice in your head. Because I think a lot of us aren't even aware of a voice in our heads.
So the first step is to
become the observer of your thoughts.
Become the observer of our thoughts and self-awareness, and not letting our autopilot running our mind and body. So you suggested that one of the practices is breathing meditation. And is there any other practice do you suggest to your clients?
I think there's quite a nice one where it's more of a mindfulness exercise, which is to become aware of negative thoughts. And I say to clients to just do it for a day or two. And what they do is they carry around a piece of paper and a pen with them. And anytime they become aware of a negative thought or of being on autopilot, they mark a tally down on the paper. And it's not so much the volume of thoughts they're having, but it's just a prompt to try and remind them to become aware when they are getting carried away on autopilot or getting carried away with negative thoughts. And it's amazing, within sort of 24 hours, most people say, oh, actually, I don't need the paper now, I'm aware of it. And that's the point of the exercise, just to start becoming the witness to the thoughts.
Correct. Because we have so many things in our mind. And if we can learn to practice on a piece of paper, we are actually clearing our mind so that we can think clearly on a piece of paper. And when we are writing any kind of negative thought, we are actually, when we have those thoughts on paper, we can really think about it. Is
Yeah,
that thought
definitely.
valid? What is the evidence behind that thought?
Yes,
Or
I
we can
think.
say, do you think this is kind of a journaling process?
Yeah, I think it can become a journaling process, because very often what I do then with people, once they've become aware of the volume, we then look at the thoughts. And I think that's so true, because you do end up, you become a witness to them. They're slightly more rational because they're written down. You get them out of your head, and you also give yourself the chance to ask the question, could another viewpoint exist?
Yeah, and when we are having so many thoughts, or I should say negative thoughts in our head, then it can create a lot of stress, which can lead to chronic stress.
Definitely.
How do you think mindfulness can help in managing our stress?
Well, I think the awareness and seeing it, and then being able to keep yourself in the present moment, I think that really helps, because I think the anxiety comes from this constant worry about the future and all the what ifs. And I say to people, it's a bit like when you're planning a journey. You need to know where your destination is. You need to know the route that you're going to take. But before you start the journey, you don't decide which traffic lights you're going to stop at, which junctions you're going to have to stop at. You can't plan in that level of detail. So with mindfulness, we're not saying you can't make plans for the future, you can't think about the future, but you can't live in it. Life happens in the here and now, and it's important to continually bring yourself back into the present moment and deal with this now.
Yeah, what you're saying is mindfulness is about present moment awareness. It is not about the future. So
No.
I would like to ask you, how do you define mindfulness in terms of layman language?
I would say it's being in the present moment without worry about the past or the future, and without judgment. So judgment in yourselves or on others, and not getting attached on to any of these thoughts other than what's going on in the present moment. So just experiencing it in the here and now.
How do you identify attachment with the thoughts, or attachment with a particular thing or with a person? Because attachment is very big in human beings. It creates a lot of sufferings, and unconsciously it comes automatic. So how can we
Yes.
navigate from attachment to non-attachment if we talk about Buddhism practice?
I think you need some level of self-compassion to not get attached, to accept that you're human, you have thoughts. As humans, we tend to be negative. We tend to be black and white as well. We want to make assumptions. We want to know the full story, and our brains will do that. And I think understanding the equipment that we have, the way our brains work, the way we're wired, the fact that we've been wired for this time for tens of thousands of generations, and we have exactly the same equipment that our caveman relatives had. So I think having an understanding of that equipment really helps us. And then I think there's a certain level of just having self-compassion and kindness. And it is not getting attached onto it. So not always understanding that another viewpoint could exist.
So talking about self-compassion, what practices do you have in self-compassion? How can somebody apply self-compassion in their lives to release attachment to the thoughts?
I think you need to learn the self-compassion first to then enable you to have empathy with others. I do quite a lot of gratitude journaling and gratitude practice to try and help see the good, and kindness, loving kindness. The loving kindness meditation, I think, is a really lovely one, because that helps foster self-compassion and kindness towards yourself and towards others.
I've heard a lot about loving kindness meditation, but personally, I have never practiced that. So how does a loving kindness meditation look like?
So it's about directing loving kindness, first of all, to someone very close to you who you do naturally have a very good relationship. And it's about setting a little intention and saying words of comfort and imagining words of comfort and kindness being said to them, that you're sharing that with them. You then go on and you share that to yourself. So it's may I be kind, may I be loving, may I be healthy. There is a sort of a set little meta meditation that you can follow, or you can make your own up. So you direct it to yourself, and then you direct it to other people that maybe you feel neutral about, and then you can go on and direct it to people that you perhaps have a more difficult, more challenging relationship with, which can help foster forgiveness and letting go, some other sort of key foundations of mindfulness. And then you extend it out into all beings as well. And when I do it in groups, when I do it with groups, you get a really lovely energy in the group. And I think people find they think it's going to be challenging, particularly with the people that they have challenges that they find difficulties with. And it's really interesting for them to observe where in their body they notice different feelings as they're talking about different people. And it's just, again, it's observing that, and it's not attaching on to that. It's not beating yourself up for feeling that way. It's about just recognizing it, recognizing we're human and we're doing our best, but letting go of it and forgiving some of these people, because very often the people that are perhaps more challenging towards us in our lives are the ones that have their own challenges themselves. They're not particularly happy. They're not aware of that voice in their head. And so they're the ones that actually need even more compassion and kindness being shown to them.
Yeah, forgiveness is not easy, and letting go is not easy.
No.
And letting go of the attachment is not easy either.
No.
How do you...
And that's an act of self-compassion to forgive other people. There's a saying about holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. That actually forgiveness isn't about saying it's okay what they've done. It's not about letting people walk over you. It's about letting go of that feeling that inside you so that you can move on. Because you end up stuck. If you're holding on to anger and resentment, you end up stuck. And the opposite is true with the loving kindness, with the meditations and things, that actually you get this really lovely helper's high. You get lovely feeling when you practice it. And that's because it releases all the real feel-good hormones within our body, and the sort of dopamine and oxytocin. So there's a real positive biological response to being kind. And apparently the kindness gene in our body is one of the oldest in our bodies. So I think we are biologically wired to be kind and to show kindness, and we get rewarded for that.
Yeah, thank you for explaining that. And I would like to ask you, what other practices we can incorporate in our day-to-day life to really deal with stress? Because this stress is everywhere nowadays. How can we deal with that?
I think it's the self-compassion. It's staying in the present moment. It's trying to stay focused in the here and now, not letting that negative self-talk carry you away. And it's reconnecting as well with your own body and your own senses, your own emotions, and allowing yourself to feel them and using them as messengers to send signals for how the changes that you want to make in future in your life.
And do you think taking pauses in our day-to-day life can help dealing with the stress?
Yes, definitely. I think that really helps. And I think that's where breathing techniques are very good. So if you're in the office or you're really busy, you're at work, then I think just to take 2 or 3 minutes just to do some breathing can help us, because a lot of people, they don't have a lot of time in the middle of the day to go and do meditation. I mean, I would always recommend, people ask me, one of the questions I get most actually through LinkedIn very often is how can I do mindfulness and meditation without actually sitting and doing it? And I say, well, the answer ideally is you want to be doing some form of meditation each day where you're actually sitting and you're taking time out just purely focus on that. And that really helps get all the benefits. That helps rewire the brain, build the prefrontal cortex. So it helps you manage emotions, manage your thoughts. But if you can't do that, any task can be done mindfully. And that's the ultimate aim of mindfulness, is that we are in the present moment, that we are experiencing the task that we're doing. So things to practice on are things like eating. So you may not want to eat an entire meal mindfully, but even if you can say for the first minute or so of eating, I'm going to really taste the foods, I'm going to switch off all distractions, and I'm just going to really focus on each of my senses. And I think working through senses, or just even focusing on one sense, can actually bring mindfulness into any everyday activity.
And you have mentioned this 5-minute mindfulness practice on your website, that while brushing your teeth you can be mindful. Can you please elaborate more on that mindfulness practice?
So anything. So it can be, so if it's something like brushing your teeth, what you could be doing is you could be focusing on the sensations of that. You could be focusing on this, you could go through each of the senses. So you could think about what do I feel, what do I taste, what can I smell? Or you could focus on your body. You could focus on your feet on the ground. And just really feel into your body, because a lot of the sort of mindful exercises, like with the everyday tasks like that, or like mindful walking as well, it's about getting out of that thinking mind and getting down into your body, so that we're connecting the mind and body, because we've got a huge amount of neurons around our body, around our heart and in our gut, that can all help with our decision making and help us really understand how we feel, what we want, what decisions we want to do. So all these exercises are very much designed as well to be able to connect that up and to be able to interpret the messages that our body is giving us at any time.
Yeah, speaking of decision making can really change our life for good. And bad decisions can ruin our life, and good decisions can change the course of our direction. And what you're speaking is being mindful and taking effective decisions.
Yeah.
So and sometimes not all the decisions are easy to take. Some decisions are hard to make.
Yeah.
So how do you make those tough decisions in your personal life?
Well, I think it has to be from the heart. And I think I've been guilty in the past of following the path, making the decisions I think other people expect me to make. So, and I think particularly early on, when I think of, like, I went to school, I was a good girl at school, I always worked hard, tried hard. I went on to university because that's what was expected. I got a good job, I got married, I had children, I went back to work, I was juggling family and career, and I was following the path that was very much expected of me. And it was really only, I guess, latterly that actually I started to question, am I following my passion and my purpose? And the answer at that stage was no, actually, I want to be doing mindfulness and teaching that full time. And at the time I wasn't. I had my own business. My business partner and I, we'd invented a potty training product for children, and we worked on that for 11 years. We'd never actually expected we were going to have the business for that long.
When did you start mindfulness teaching?
I started about 4 years ago. I started just with sort of friends and acquaintances, and just in small groups as a hobby, very much as a hobby, because I was still working at that stage full time on my business. And then it was last April, when we were able to sell the business, that I then went and did a teacher training course down in Oxford in England. And that was an intensive week-long course. I think it's the only one, certainly, that I've heard of that you can actually do it so intensely, and with people from all over the world actually come to that.
It's in England.
Yes, they do quite a few. Yeah, with someone from the States, actually, a cardiologist from the States come across, people from Spain. So there is a demand for it, and there's not that many courses around. So I did that last April, and then started since then. I've set it up as my business, as my sort of my main business.
Exactly. In this society these days, we are constantly moving forward, and then we create stress, anxiety in our body, in our mind, because we want to achieve so many things. We want to achieve big things in life, and we have performance anxiety. And in your work, you also coach clients, and you have courses around peak performance. So what is peak performance for somebody who doesn't know about performance?
So I think that tends to be the sort of, when you say that, flashes in my mind the sort of the people that I deal with a lot through LinkedIn, the real high achievers, the people that are living a very fast-paced life. They've got a responsible job. They're highly paid. They're very busy. They don't have a lot of free time. Probably juggling families as well. And that's the way they live their life. They're very highly motivated. They're very good at what they do. And I think the issue is very often that they can experience stress and burnout if they're not careful, or they end up dropping some of the balls. They can't juggle everything, particularly as they get older. And I see it at some of my clients. They're sort of they come to me and their wives come to me, and their relationships are suffering as a result of this constant burnout and requiring so much energy for their everyday work. And this feeling that it's a feeling, I guess, of being trapped, that they are high achievers, that this is what's expected of them, this is what their jobs expect of them, and it's to be able to then balance that with some of their own self-compassion again, and take some time out, have some tools, I guess, to be able to manage that stress, perhaps to reframe it, to use it as a challenge, and to know how to then take a step back and try and get some balance back in their life.
So what's your framework to coach somebody who is already a high performer, but they are burned out, they are not having quality relationship in their life, and they want to have that balance in their personal, professional life?
The process I would work through with them is exactly the same as the process that I'd work with anyone else. So I would start once again with them becoming the observer of their thoughts, then mastering those thoughts. So they get to know themselves better. They get to know, because very often they're the ones that they're very highly driven, and it could be the voice in their head is the voice of a parent or a teacher that keeps driving them. The sort of, you should be good at this, you should be amazing at your job, you shouldn't make mistakes, you should be perfect at everything you do. So it's very often very important for these people to actually hear that voice, because perfectionism is a big issue.
And for these high performers, all these things are woo-woo. So what tangible practices would you have for these high performers?
I think one of my favourite ones is if you can find a framework, then that really helps appeal to these clients because they're used to it. So there was a few weeks ago, I was working with someone, and then I found an old book that I'd had. It was 1999. I'd last opened the book because I found an old swimming timetable inside it, so I knew exactly when I'd last looked at it. But it was by Stephen Covey, and it's the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Wow.
And it's one that we got work in any management course we ever went to, because I worked in corporate for about 5 years before I started my own business. And so it was, and I opened the book just coincidentally, and one of the first things that jumped out at me was, he said that the first habit was about being able to take a step back and basically become the witness. And I thought, that's mindfulness, that's what I talk about. But he had a little framework then for looking at things you can control, things you can influence, and then the things that you can't control and influence, which I think it was really, really good for people who are stressed at work, because very often the thing that stresses them is the things that are outside their control, because they're so used to being in control. They're high achievers, they're great at what they do, and they know if someone tells them to do something, they can do it, and they can do it well. But what they really struggle with is the sort of the delegation, or the things that are outside of their control. And so being able to put things into the framework to say, okay, this is what I can control, this is what I can influence, and then everything else I may be concerned about, but I'm letting go of. And I think in general that actually really helps with stress, because with stress and stressful situations, very often we get caught up in this sort of the what ifs.
And stress can lead to burnout. And I see a lot of people getting burnout. And there is this amazing book called The High Energy. I'm forgetting the name of that book. The Energy Management, something like that. I will put that book name in the show notes. I can't remember that. So it talks about physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual energy. We all have this energy, and we have this reservoir of energy tank. If we do not fill this energy tank, we get depleted, and by the end of the day, we don't have any energy left, and we are burnout is there is no energy, because it starts from stress, and we keep depleting our energy, and energy is physical, emotional, mental, spiritual energy, and by the end of the day or during afternoon, we are burnout, and we cannot focus on the things that really matter. So whenever you have a coaching client and they are saying they burn out, and you have these practices where observing your thoughts, journaling, practicing gratitude, taking a step back, unplugging, what else? Is there any other thing? Yeah,
one of the things, there's a story about a professor that springs to mind, and it's a jar of, I think it's a jar of stones or a jar of balls. Basically, a professor stands in front of his class with a big glass jar, and he starts filling it up with big rocks, and he says to the class, is the jar full? And they all say yes, it's full. But then he brings out some small rocks and puts them in the spaces within, says to them, is it full now? And they say yes, it's full now. And then he gets sand and he pours that in as well. And then what he says is, you've got to remember the sand is different. They're all each of the elements are different things. And he says the order you put things in your jar determines how well you can fill it up, how much you can fill into it. So the most important thing to do is make sure that the things that you're putting in your jar first, so the things you're filling your life with first, are the important things. So the family and the things that you really want to have in your life. And then you fill up the spaces with the things that are more insignificant. So the sand can be things like sitting in social media aimlessly, mindlessly, scrolling through different things on Facebook. But it's really important to work out and be conscious of what your priorities are, so that you make sure that you're fitting them into your life. And there's another similar one. It was Richard Branson that I'd heard and talked about it, and he talked about having different balls that you're juggling, and that some of the balls, when you drop them, bounce, and then other ones smash. Some of them are effectively glass balls. So you've got to make sure that you look after, and that you're looking after the glass ones, and the glass ones are things like the family and the things that are really important to you. So when you're really busy, you've got to understand what your priorities are and what can't be replaced. And I think these help.
And being busy is not productive all the time. And I remember sometimes I feel this personally. I'm feeling like I'm running around every day. And, sometimes when I review my day at the end of the day, and I feel that I did nothing which really mattered. I was doing all the freaking things, but I did not achieve the things that really matter. And that's where awareness, a lot of self-awareness and mindfulness of what really matters. Things that really matters. I can give a short example on this. I approached one of the highly recommended PhDs in the mindfulness space, and he declined my request straightforward. And I had two choices, either to take it personally or just say, this is what it is. So I chose this is what it is. He is most likely working on his priorities right now, what really matters to move the needle, and being on the podcast is not his priority. He's saying no right now, but it doesn't mean that he will say no all the time. So I told myself I can get back to him maybe after a year.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And I think that sometimes no's can actually work out. Well, sometimes they're just not yet. Sometimes they can be blessings because it's not the right time. And I think that one of the most important things for us to do is not take these things personally, because very often it's not a personal slight. It's situations and it's priorities at that time. But I think if we get into that fear of being told no, that's very often something that holds us back. We feel that we've done something wrong, and it can make a lot of people give up, which I think is a huge shame, because I guess if you're told no at different stages, if that had been like one of the first podcasts that you've done, you might have felt slightly different about it.
Yes, absolutely.
So I think being told no and getting good at receiving no's is actually a really good way of building up resilience.
Yeah, so talking about building resilience, how would you explain resilience?
I think resilience is your ability to bounce back and to stay at sort of an emotional equilibrium. So everyone has bad days. We all have bad days. We all have what we would regard as bad things happening to us. But it's the ability to be able to bounce back from that. So not to get stuck in that energy, and to try and recover our own equilibrium and move forward and use it positively.
So whenever you are going through any tough time or failure in your life, how do you practice resiliency? Do you have any tangible practice?
Yes. So the first thing I always try and do is be kind to myself, and to say, no matter what I'm feeling, it's okay to feel that way. So any emotion, and try not sort of categorize it as a good emotion or a bad emotion. So if you feel tired, you feel slow, I just try and think that's my body's natural response to the situation, and almost let it play out. Like your body knows very often how to deal with stress. It knows what it should be doing to be able to recognize it and to move forward from it. So I think that's number one, is it's okay to feel this way and to go with it, but then to try and take the learning from it and to go over that fear and not listen to the voice of doubt in your head that might be trying to tell you to stop doing things, and just not take things too personally and keep the sort of the bigger picture. I think that's where, if we can get on our own path where we're following our own heart and our own authentic life, it's much easier to stay strong in those situations because we don't get knocked over so much. Whereas if we're trying to live our life based on how we think we should be living,
Yes.
from outside factors, I think when those outside factors start telling us you're wrong, you're not good enough, we believe it all the more, and we don't have that sort of that personal fire within our belly telling us, I've got a bigger message to get out. There's a reason I'm doing this. I'm not doing this for my own ego. I'm doing this, well, certainly from my point of view, I'm doing the mindfulness because I really believe there's a need for people to have this awareness and to have this teaching.
Yeah. And we are going to fail many
Yes.
times.
Yeah.
And if we are not failing enough, it means we are not trying hard enough.
Yes.
In that failing process, that's where resiliency plays a very big role, because it defines our bounce back factor. How soon we get back to our normal course when we fail. We do not define ourselves with that failure. We simply acknowledge, we are kind to ourselves and saying this is okay to fail at this, because I have a bigger purpose. I have a bigger picture in my life. And if this thing is not working, maybe I get to try something else. And that's when I would like to connect with the growth mindset. And that's when you teach growth mindset in achieving peak optimal performance. Can you please elaborate between fixed mindset and growth mindset?
So the growth mindset is exactly that. So it's listening to what's going on around and being able to bounce back and to be able to make those adjustments and not getting stuck in the sort of what if I make a mistake mentality, the black and white, the idea if I can't do it perfectly, I'm not going to try. It's about putting the effort in, and it's about trying and progress, not perfection. That's very much the growth mindset. But the fixed mindset tends to be the people that you see that they want to be amazing at it, and if they can't do it straight away, then they'll give up and they think, oh, it's not for me, I'm not a natural. So they always think it's talent rather than effort. That I'm no good at music, I'm no good at playing the piano, I'm no good at maths, and they sort of make excuses and just give up. And it's the self-doubt again. It's that I'm not good enough at that.
Do you remember any instance from your life when you were into fixed mindset, and because of mindfulness you were able to shift from fixed mindset to growth mindset?
Well, there's one quite recently, actually. In fact, it's going on just now. So about middle of February, one of the ladies that I've met through LinkedIn, she's a video marketer. And she was setting up a challenge, a video challenge for the whole of the month of March, where we each had to post a video, record a video and post it on social media somewhere. So LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, wherever, every single day. Now, I'd been talking for about 5 months at that stage about doing videos. And every week it was on my to-do list. I'm going to make a video. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. I know it's important from a marketing point of view. I know it's a good way to get my message out. I understood that, but I never quite got around to it. I was always procrastinating. And when that challenge came out, I really had to fight the urge to say, no, I can't do it this time. I'm not going to be good at it. I knew it was going to be really difficult. And I did that. I did eventually say, right, okay, I'm going to join this challenge. And I knew it was, when I recorded my first video, it was going up, it was going live, but not quite for the whole world to see. I'm not that interesting. But I knew that people that I like my peers or colleagues were going to see it because it was going on LinkedIn, and I had to completely get over myself and just know that I would get better at it through practice. And I have continued working on this until the end of March, and so far I have managed to post a video every day. And actually, I've had some really lovely feedback from people saying, "I'm so pleased to see how your quality's improved." So, and again, I have to take that very much from a growth mindset and not see that as a slight on me, that they're actually saying my first video was really shockingly bad, but actually to think, no, actually I'm improving, and I'm walking the talk. I'm doing what I say to others to do, which I do think is important. And actually, I'm really proud of myself that I have been able to do and that I have improved, and that I am doing, not only telling other people, but actually doing what I recommend to others, which is often difficult.
Yeah. Do you think accountability plays a big role in developing growth mindset?
Definitely. Yeah, I think that really helps. I think that definitely makes it easier to do. Because I know with this particular challenge that it was the fact that we were working as a group and everyone had said that they were going to do it. And I had publicly said to this group, yes, I'm going to do it. And seeing others as well going through it and seeing them improving and seeing their different struggles, it makes you realise that we're all very similar. We're all human and we all have those doubts. And I'd watch a video of someone else and think, oh my God, that was amazing. They were just so professional. And then I speak to them in the weekly call and they say, oh yeah, that video was terrible and I'm not happy with it, but I just had to get it up. So I think, yes, accountability is definitely very helpful. And that's where working with mentors and coaches, I think, is very important, because that helps give you that.
Yep. And what are the bad recommendations do you see or hear in your mindfulness profession?
Oh, sorry, you broke up there.
What are the bad recommendations do you see or hear in your mindfulness profession?
Sorry, the bad recommendations? Yeah. I think the thing that frustrates me is when people say I can't do mindfulness or meditation because my mind's too busy, and almost like they're I guess that's the fixed mindset from that respect, that actually I'll not be any good at this, or I've tried it once. I tried mindfulness, but it didn't work for me. I couldn't clear my mind. And I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions about mindfulness and meditation, that it's about having an empty mind. We're meant to have thoughts. We have about 60,000 thoughts each day. That's the way our mind works, in the same way that our heart's meant to beat, our mind is meant to think. And it's not about clearing the mind, it's about having a better relationship with the mind and with those thoughts.
Yeah, and I would like to ask you one very important question, which is actually very important to me. What is the correlation between emotional regulation and success?
Oh, I think there's a big correlation. And I think very often actually the correlation is between the emotional regulation and success, like inner success, and the ability to have the growth mindset. Because I think if you don't feel regulated emotionally, then you become your own worst enemy. And that's when all the self-talk and the voice in the mind gets carried away and you can't cope. And when you can't cope, that's when you give up. So I think giving up very often, and the fear takes over. And that's very often with people that are highly emotional. They can't push through the pain and the barrier. Whereas the people that are more centered, they've got more resilience, they're more aware of their emotions, they're able to respond and take the time and to think things through before they react. And I think that helps with their own relationship, but also helps with the relationship with others. And I think a large part of success in life, whether it's in business and relationships at home, is about having that emotional regulation and that ability to respond and not immediately react.
Yeah, and I remember while I was in corporate 10 years ago that people used to say emotions have no role in business. Oh. I think that's when people are in corporate or in any industry, they feel that we don't have to show our emotions. We don't have to show our vulnerable side. And this is a misconception. If we are not, it doesn't mean that we have to cry or we have to be over emotional that's a problem. That's a problematic
Yes.
situation. But if
Yeah.
we are attuned to our emotions and feelings, we can connect with other coworkers at a
Yeah.
human level. They are just
Yeah.
human beings.
Yeah, I think being able to show vulnerability is so important. I think it's really good in teamwork to be able to see others being vulnerable and doing difficult things. And I think this idea of suppressing your emotions is so dangerous to people. And I think that's what's causing a lot of the stress and the burnout, because we're not processing it, we're not listening to our bodies and our minds. And we're cutting ourselves off from that. We're numbing it, whether it's through alcohol, through eating too much, whether it's through mindless TV each night. I think that is just so unhealthy for us. And that whole sort of mindset of not showing emotions, I think, is very dangerous.
And there could be inner block. Something is
Yeah.
blocking us to really be mindful about the situations around us. So how do you think we can identify those blocks to
I think
leading mindful life?
I think that's something we have to do for ourselves. I don't think anyone else can ever go inside and retrieve our own blocks. And I think that's about sitting still and listening to what's going on inside our own bodies. And when we're able to do that and detach all these emotions from the thoughts that very often get entangled to them, and just listen to the voice of the heart and the soul. And I think that's when then we can start making better decisions.
Yeah, and listening to this inner voice is so tough for people because we are constantly surrounded by noise. We don't listen to our inner voice.
No, we don't. No, we don't even know it's there. No,
it's there.
And it's difficult. It's difficult to hear it. It's difficult, and it's difficult to want to know what it's saying, because very often that voice is telling us something different that could shake up our whole lives. So sometimes it can be, well, in my situation, my inner voice was telling me that actually I wasn't pursuing the career that I wanted to be pursuing, and I wasn't satisfied with it at that stage. And I had my own business. You can't just hand your notice in and walk away from it. I also had a very strong belief that you have to see things through. You can't fail at things. So I had that inner voice to deal with as well. And I think I probably suppressed that for quite a long time, because I didn't really want to hear it, because it was going to cause a huge amount of disruption in my life. And I wasn't ready to deal with that. And it took a lot of my mindfulness practice to actually be able to be still enough to listen to it, and to then work out that I was going to listen to it. And even if I couldn't do anything in the short term, I was going to work towards it in the longer term.
Yeah, and listening to this inner voice is really important. And in my personal life, it really helps me when I listen to my inner voice. And to really listen to that voice, I go for walks in the neighborhood. I go for nature walks without any music, without phone, so that I can really be myself in the nature, in the surrounding, and not being with electronic gadgets, because they are distractions. They are serving our life. They are giving us good things, but they can be freaking distractions. They are consuming our time, and at the end of the day, we feel where my time went.
Yes.
And how we spend so much time on social media, which is using social media mindfully is awesome, but if we use all those things mindlessly, that is not going to serve our bigger purpose. And I am also guilty of using social media mindlessly sometimes.
Yes, me too. Yes.
But I'm aware of it.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and now and again, it's not going to do any harm. Again, it's not black and white. I think it's then having that awareness and it not becoming a habit that we do all the time.
And not beating ourselves for not adhering to the rules and principles and not being mindful all the time. So I'd like to ask you this question. So do you have any specific morning routine?
Yes, I do. So I tend to get up, get a cup of hot water and lemon, and I'll take it back to bed, and I'll sit and I'll work out what I need to do for the day. So I'll have a look at my diary and see what's in my diary for the day. And then very often I'll write things down at that point. So I'll either do what I'm going to write as a post, or write something that's come into my mind. So sort of content about sort of mindfulness. Because I do find that's quite a creative time for me, that time in the morning when everything's fairly quiet. And then I'll get up and often do some exercise at that stage. So this morning I went for a run outside. My gym's closed just now. So I went for a run outside and did a little meditation while I was out. So like you, I love getting out into nature, and I find nature is very healing. And when I was out running, I stopped halfway just at the edge of some woods, and I just stood and I just watched what was going on around me. And I love trying to tap into that, the stillness of nature, but at the same time it's still very vibrant. There's still so much life and vibrancy in it, as well as having a real calming, grounding stillness. And I just stood for a couple of minutes and tried to sort of get in touch with that, and then ran back. So I normally do some exercise and then sort of carry on with sort of getting breakfast for my children, and I'm normally getting them sort of ready to go out to school and things. So yeah, so that's I'd like to start my day each time with that.
Awesome. And I would like to ask you, my last question for this podcast recording is, what is the impact you want to have on this world?
I want the people, so I'm hugely, I get a huge incentive from that, the Bonnie Ware quote, with people saying, I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life of others expected of me. And I think that's such a huge waste of life. And I want to try and catch people early on, the people that would be sitting in 30, 40 years saying that. And I want to help them recognise the life they want, and to help give them the courage to be true to themselves, to listen to their inner voice, and to actually make the changes and go ahead and harvest the life they want to live.
Well, Diane, thank you so much for all your insights, knowledge, and wisdom.
Thank you for having me.
And I would like to tell all the social media. So what's your social media handle so that people can follow you?
Time to Flourish UK.
Great. I will put all these information in the show notes.
Yeah. And I put quite a bit on LinkedIn. It's just Diane Titterton on LinkedIn as well.
Well, Diane, thank you so much for being on the show.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
It's been lovely speaking to you. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope you learned from this episode that you can apply in your life. If you did enjoy this, please subscribe to this podcast, The Nishant Garg Show, on Apple Podcasts, and please leave reviews. Also, you can make an impact in someone else's life by sharing this podcast episode. When you share this, you can transform someone else's life. I'm so grateful that we got Diane on this podcast and share her message with the world. So please spread the message everywhere. As Rumi Jalaluddin said, stop acting so small. You are the universe in ecstatic motion. So thank you again.